Okay, so you can't see it on the screen, but I do have a little notepad that I'm going to use to write down ideas for improving our sim with one more pass through everything. We already know that we want to add color fields. We want to obviously add the spikes, shockwave, and debris. That's obvious. And that's about it right now. Okay, I'm gonna have this off to the side as we go through. It's really useful to pull up the reference and then to pull up the simulation and let it play side by side. And as they're playing, try to pick out differences, similarities, things that are working, things that aren't working, because we're going to use that to influence what we write down here on the notepad. So I'm going to let this play on loop. This is what we have with the full render. And let's get going. So the first thing that I want to think about is the speed at which all the smoke is evolving. Notice how this slows down quite a bit as this goes on. And we actually have the ability to essentially add a drag to all of this animation right here. And so the first thing I'd like to do is slow down the time scale of the evolution. So slow down time scale. And we could do that through the time scale parameter in the solver. We can also do that through a drag, essentially. There is a new node with Houdini 19 that essentially allows us to drag or to slow down that evolution. So we can take a look at that. Let's move on now to other things. I'm going to skip past this guy and move on to this reference. Okay, so same deal here. It just kind of slows down, and this is actually a great comparison. Looking at this, look how slow this moves over here compared to what we have. That needs to slow down big time. Let's also take a look at the initial impact, see what's going on. So it's hard to tell, but what is happening here is that we do have the nice little fire kind of flash happen. That could probably be shortened in time. And then for the actual glow inside of our smoke plume, that can be extended. So in other words, I want to make the fire flash faster and die out, kind of like a flame that just kind of licks on through. And then with the glow, I want that glow to last longer. So I'm going to control the animation separately between those two. So that's another thing. And let me write that down while we're at it. So fire dies out more quickly, glow stays around longer. Cool. Let's see what we have here. Also, I think that it will enhance the simulation greatly to have a camera shake. So we will add in camera shake. As far as the shading goes, some of this is personal preference. We do have this smoke color here, which is really, really soft looking. I'm not as much of a fan of that, although sometimes it is cool. I do like it a bit thicker. If we look at our current shading, and I'll just go ahead and pause this real quick, I matched this up to what we were seeing around here. And so I think we are getting a pretty good situation out of that. I would like to change the lighting a bit though. Our shadows are matching nicely in the values. However, I do want to bring in more of that fill light that's coming up from the bottom left. So, and not by too much, but a little bit more. So I'll say bring up bottom fill light. There we go. Just because we're losing a lot of detail in these areas, it's technically actually not really there. But anyway, we can adjust that in comp. I do like, however, that we are losing detail along here and we don't have detail along here. One thing that is bothering me though is the fact that the shapes on our plume are getting pulled down. And that has to do with what's going on with that buoyancy microsolver. And so if we bring things down, we don't want them to stretch out. And that's kind of what's happening along here. We don't actually see that in this simulation. So what I'll say is readdress the buoyancy downward velocity. There we go. So that we don't get those stretching. And maybe we have to keyframe that. Maybe we just have the downward stretching initially at first, and then we kind of let off the gas as this evolves over time. Maybe that's the route to go. But as far as the shapes are concerned, that's the main difference between this and this right now. So it's worth pointing out. Okay, so let's go maybe check out some of this reference towards the end. Okay, so on this explosion, we have this huge plume going on. If you wanted to make this look even bigger, or I guess a bit more like this, you could simulate this, puff multiple times and kind of offset the location where it's happened. So you basically take this multiple times, or you can heck even rotate this whole thing. And even though this is a crude play blast, this gives you an idea of what you can get. You can actually get this going out in more directions. If you do this though, be sure that the wind direction is not too intense, because if you have two wind directions, it'll look weird. But besides that, this might be a nice hack for thickening out a large explosion. So, the other thing too to think about is, and there's those colors again. I think those colors are nice. It just breaks it up, makes it feel bigger. But another thing to notice here as well is that the speed greatly depends on the camera angle. You see, like that evolved really fast and then it kind of slows down a tad bit. And that's what we're seeing with this speed right here. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of the main thing. If we wanted to alter the shockwave, we could also do something a bit more subtle, like what we see right there. So that's also another option. We can go with this route where it's very subtle, or we can go with what we saw here where it's more pronounced. But either way, that's what's going on there. But let's also just double check the shading on the shockwave so that it's subtle. We don't want the shockwave going too crazy. I'll just write down, make it subtle, and also optional, we can address multiple explosions being layered on top of each other. Or for that matter, if we want multiple explosions along the ground, we can address that. If we are going to do multiple explosions on the ground, then we should start from the back and work towards the camera so that we're not just exploding something behind this guy because we might not see it. So that just might be like a cinematic choice. Some of this stuff is going to be straightforward. Some of this stuff is not. Also, as we go over our network, it's time to organize and write commentary so that if you come back to this at some point or anyone else, you know what's happening because this network is huge. All right, so that gives you guys an idea of the kind of critique you want to do for yourself, the kind of critique you can expect from a studio. Again, it's useful to bring everything through from A to Z so that we can see what needs to happen from here, make your notes, and then just rapid fire, go through all these things and make it happen. We'll do some of that in the next video.